The intention of justice is to see that the guilty people are proven guilty and that the innocent are freed. Only we have a problem here.
Welcome. This is the I Don't Belong Here show, and I am your host, Samantha Benigno. I am a behavioral scientist, a career psychotherapist, a sixth-year PhD candidate in clinical psychology, a master's level psychologist and counselor. And today, we are taking a closer look at Wendi Adelson and her writing class. Anyone who's followed this case closely has probably seen or at least heard of or heard excerpts from Wendi Adelson's writing class.
On July 18th, 2014, someone shot my ex-husband in the head while he was pulling into our garage after he dropped our then 3- and 4-year-old sons off at school.
This has been featured all over the place, and it is definitely worth getting a good listen into. However, when you look a little bit more closely, I think there are two sort of layers to what Wendi is saying in her writing class. And what I would encourage you to consider as we go through this and as you go through it on your own is her intent behind what she is saying. Now, one thing that is absolutely for sure, one thing we know about first any of Donna Adelson's children, number one, and number two, specifically about Wendi Adelson, is that she's very concerned about how everybody else sees her.
I think for me, a lot of the additional pain I felt, on top of the murder and everything associated with was it felt unfair that I couldn't at least tell my own story, that the story got told for me. So I think there was an aspect of empowerment of being able to say, no, this is my side of the story. This is what things looked like from my perspective.
So you've got to consider that within the first year after Dan Markel was murdered, and as time went on and the Adelsons became more important to the story, more front and center in his murder, which took a little while, but not too long after, right? Because as Wendi likes to say, and as she said even in her police interview, it's always the ex-wife, right?
What?
What? Oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening.
Okay, all right. Let me go get the form for the phone.
Do I need to be read my Miranda rights or something if you're going to look at my phone?
I can read you Miranda if you want to hear that.
I don't know, I'm just trying to make sure I'm being
I have no
protected.
reason at this point to suspect you in this incident. Okay?
I couldn't tell from the way you were talking to me in the car if I was a suspect.
Well, no, and the reason was I didn't want to get into everything until we got up here.
They all live in Canada.
Okay.
His family's all in Canada.
Okay.
They're going to think I did it.
Now, and you're not under arrest or anything like that.
I understand why you think I'm the primary suspect.
No, you're not the primary suspect. I have to work just as hard whether you were or you're not.
Okay, I understand.
To show what your activities were.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And let's put it this way. I think you're a straightforward person. And I think at this point, if you had anything to do with this, you'd have already told me.
Okay.
And you haven't.
Okay.
And you haven't.
I understand why I'm a suspect. I guess I'm not a suspect. I understand why you would think that I would do this, but not you, but...
Right.
Clearly, the Adelsons were on everybody's radar early on after Dan Markel's death. If you just hear what all the friends and family had to say as they were being brought in for interviews with police, they were all pretty much pointing their fingers right at Charlie and the family more broadly.
She was pretty unreasonable about a lot of stuff and frankly vindictive and mean. She just did not, he would kind of agree. He constantly tried to kind of keep things civil. And
maybe I can just make it simpler than that. Maybe I could just say, I would be investigating Charlie Adelson.
A couple of folks specifically indicated odd behavior from Harvey.
It just makes more sense to me.
That's the
so I don't
only
know
thing
if I'm reading that into
I was like,
him.
either her,
the father in particular.
Right, the father in particular. He just set off like a
At the memorial.
Only
Yeah,
at the
too many.
memorial, just because he wouldn't look at me and he didn't.
Yeah, I actually kind of tried to.
We
wave
tried.
him once
Yeah, I
and
tried
everything.
to. I was literally, not.
I'm
very
sure he was
calm.
uncomfortable, so I don't.
But I don't want to read into it that
Okay.
much, because anybody could be emotional and everybody
Well, and
grieves
if
differently.
if they don't have anything to do with it, this is horrible because everyone probably thinks they do, and they know that.
Her mom came out. I hugged her mom. The boys running around like nothing was going wrong. And I was so glad. I just had to see them. Like, I wanted to be near some part of Danny. And I asked the mom, like, how did you find out? She said, we're in Miami. Wendy called from the police station. We drove all night. And she seemed appropriately, like, upset. Then her dad, who I've met half a dozen times, Coral Springs, up here, he gave me this look, and I don't know what my facial reaction was to it, but I'm almost positive it was one of suspicion and anger, because he can't even look me in the face today. And it was awkward, and it never had been before. That really bothered me.
Was it common for him to look you in the face? I mean, some people just don't do it.
No, not like an Asperger's kid. No, he was, yeah, absolutely. At least when someone's talking generally, you're listening and looking. No, it was odd.
He recognized you. It
Of
wasn't a
course,
question
he's
of
like,
that.
TJ, hey, yeah.
But he would not look you in the eye.
He started off fine, and then when we locked eyes, it was like something transpired that didn't sit well with either one of us, I guess. And then today he would not even look at me. I found that to be very unsettling.
And this would be Wendy's father.
Yes.
Harvey?
Mm-hmm. Harvey. Charlie was supposed to come up, her younger brother, but he didn't. That was also strange because she was positive he was coming and then he wasn't.
And my guess would be that that's actually because he's the one that felt the most guilty about what had happened. But that behavior indicates clearly to me that he certainly knew about what had happened. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that Harvey had an awareness of what was going on, even if he wasn't involved in any way in the direct planning or execution of the death of Dan Markell. But as time was going on and Wendy was getting more indicators of the fact that the media and everybody globally was beginning to start to suspect the Adelsons had something to do with this, she would have wanted some way to get her voice out. And my guess is that she chose this writing class, not only because it would give her an opportunity to advance her writing, but because she must have known that there was a podcast connected to it and that it would give her an opportunity to get her story out there without directly speaking to the media or directly speaking to Dan's murder at all. So it is kind of typical Wendy to try to find a way to get her message out there without doing it directly. So she's a smart cookie, and this is just another example of that. But given all of that, she is very intentionally selecting what she is saying to try to put her story out. And even though, as I was going through this, I already knew that, she eventually verifies that at the end when the interviewer, or when the person putting on this class, asks her about her experience taking the class and telling everybody about the death of Dan Markell.
I don't know if you remember this. I didn't know we were all going to read what we wrote in class. I thought maybe some of us would read if we felt like it, and I didn't think that would be me. I think for me, a lot of the additional pain I felt, on top of the murder and everything associated with, was it felt unfair that I couldn't at least tell my own story, that the story got told for me. So I think there was an aspect of empowerment, of being able to say, no, this is my side of the story. This is what things looked like from my perspective.
So she admits that this is her story and that it felt good, that she felt empowered by getting to get her side of things out there. So don't forget to keep that in mind as we are going through this. It is very deliberate. She is very deliberately selecting what she's saying. And I'm sure that's why Wendi likes writing, because it gives you time to think carefully before you say anything at all. And this is someone who loves that, right? She's going to like not having her feet held to the fire because it gives her more of an opportunity to think long and hard about what she wants to say so that she can control how you perceive her. Because that's the thing. That's what Wendi is the most talented at doing. Everything you see with Wendi Adelson is really an act. It's a performance, right?
So we had it out, and the reason that's important is she was very concerned about her social reputation. Are you going to tell anybody about this?
About what? Her having sex with Daniel?
And Miguel and Mahul and other men. Yeah, and I said, we stay together, I won't. If we don't, I won't slander you, but let's be adults here. This is Tallahassee. You know how many people I know have cheated on their wives? I must be realistic here. I said, I'm not going to try to destroy your reputation, but you made these choices. And by the way, I'm not...
Did she give a reason?
It's deeply important to her she be perceived a certain way.
No, did she give a reason why she was having multiple sex partners?
Not a good one, no. I mean, she said she didn't, actually.
You can be the good actress when you want to be, remember? So she needs to put on the performance of a lifetime. Well, that's her whole life. Her whole life is about wearing masks and being the good little performer. And it doesn't stop here, even when she's admitting to that very fact as we go through this.
I gave the prompt, "How are you really?" Wendi wrote about her ex-husband's murder.
On July 18th, 2014, someone shot my ex-husband in the head while he was pulling into our garage after he dropped our then 3- and 4-year-old sons off at school. I only found out this information when the police picked me up from a lunch date I was having with 2 girlfriends and insisted that I come with them back to the station, and then interrogated me for 8 straight hours, because it's usually the ex-wife.
Okay, so the first prompt that they are given that Wendi's going to be responding to is, how are you really? Which is actually perfect for Wendi Adelson, because on the surface, she's just simply being given an opportunity to speak more honestly about how she's really doing. Okay. So here we go. Her reaction to the prompt, how are you really? At first is, on July 18th, 2014, someone shot my ex-husband in the head while he was pulling into our garage after he dropped our then 3- and 4-year-old sons off at school. All right, so a couple of things right off the bat. Okay. So on July 18th, 2014, someone, now that's a word intentionally selected to indicate quickly, right off the bat, to the reader that they don't know who it was. Okay. So right off the bat, one of the first things she's telling us is, we don't know who did this. But what is that also saying? What is it also saying if one of the first things she's telling us is someone, not me, right? So right off the bat, the first thing she wants us to know is, I didn't shoot my ex-husband. Okay. So that's the very first statement that she's making here without saying it directly. I digress. Notice that she gives us the date and she doesn't give us how long ago that was. But we know that this was on December 2nd of 2015. Okay. Or at least that's when this was published. So you know exactly how long ago that was, right? It's about 18 months. So a year and a half. And I'm suspecting that the actual class was even earlier than that. So what do we know? We know it's approximately a year. Okay. So approximately a year earlier. someone, not Wendi, shot, and this is interesting, so she's taking ownership of her ex-husband, so my ex-husband. So the point of my ex-husband is she wants you to know that she's close to this event. Okay. Someone shot him in the head. Okay. Now, if you're really smart, when you're making this statement, where all of your attention is going to go is to the salacious way that she is telling us her ex-husband was actually shot, right? He was shot in the head. Well, that's in detail that we really don't need. And all that's going to do is cause shock to the reader. But it's a tactic that's going to take our attention away from the first part of the sentence, which is someone and how long ago it was. Okay. So someone around a year ago shot my husband is very different than someone a year ago, not me, shot my ex-husband, where there's total ownership, in the head. But she doesn't stop there. She goes on to tell us that this all happened while he was pulling into our garage, which is really interesting. And it gives you a sense of how she felt about this house. So while this is her ex-husband, but the house is still ours. So he's an ex-husband, although she still owns him. It's my ex-husband, right? And then my garage is what she's telling you. So, because at this point, the house is no longer Wendy's. As part of their divorce agreement, that house was Dan's house. And they're divorced. They've been divorced. Remember the whole motion and the whole thing about leaving and moving and that being dismissed, right? The motion to relocate. So they're divorced. This is not her house. This is his house. But what she's telling you here is that she still feels like that's our house. That's my house. That's what she's telling you, right? So someone, we don't know who, but not me, shot my ex-husband in the head while he was pulling into my garage after he had dropped our small children off at school. Okay? So the whole point of this first paragraph is to get us to see this as happening to her, is to point out how close she is to this event. And that screams, I'm the victim here. So this is a really informative statement, and it's riddled with intent. And one of the ways that we know it's riddled with intent is because of its length. Now, if you've ever taken a writing class, in all likelihood, most people are going to suggest that you don't begin the very first sentence of whatever you're writing as a very long run-on sentence, right? I mean, this is a very long sentence. On July 18th, 2014, someone shot my ex-husband in the head while he was pulling into our garage after he dropped our then 3- and 4-year-old sons off at school. Okay, that's a very long sentence, which would not be advised by probably any writing tutor or teacher. But it's written this way very intentionally by Wendi because these are the things she absolutely wants and needs you to know right off the top. And now it gets even more interesting. I only, and this is, think about this, I only found out this information when the police picked me up from a lunch date I was having with two girlfriends. And then they insisted that I come with them back to the station. And then they interrogated me for 8 straight hours because it's usually the ex-wife. But now this is the second sequence of details that she wants you to have. Now, this is all very intentional. Remember that. This is what she wants you to believe. And I will draw your attention to, I only found out this information. Now, this is the kind of thing that immediately indicates consciousness of guilt. And the reason for that is people that are innocent of crimes don't feel the need to stress only. They wouldn't need to say that, right? In other words, if I have nothing to do with this, and if I did not feel in any way that it was my responsibility or my fault that my ex-husband was shot, I would just say, I found out when this is what happened. I would not feel obligated to tell you that I only found out this information. Right? That's why this is an indicator of consciousness of guilt, because the whole thing when you're trying to detect deception is understanding that when somebody is guilty and acting innocent, they say and do things that are distinctly different from people who are innocent with nothing to hide. They don't realize it. They think that they're acting the way that they would if they were innocent, but that's not the case. So really smart Wendi thinks that she's behaving like an innocent person, except she forgot or didn't know that innocent people don't throw words out there like only right up front in the beginning after they're telling somebody that their ex-husband was shot. Okay, so this is a tell. I didn't know about it before that, found out this information when the police picked me up. So what is that saying? When the police picked me up, which means literally, physically picked her up from a lunch date I was having with two girlfriends. Now, why is that important to say? Well, because what she wants you to know here is that, see, she was at a lunch date with her girlfriends when this all happened. So she had an alibi. But what she doesn't realize is that hidden in this very intentional language are some tells about how she really feels. Wendi says, when the police picked me up from a lunch date I was having with two girlfriends and insisted that I come with them back to the station. With indicates conflict. And that's interesting. It's interesting that as she's recalling this innocent lunch date with her two girlfriends, in her mind, there's some kind of conflict there. And would that be surprising given that it's very likely she did know about the murder and this was an alibi, that she was there, trying to act all normal, but in her mind freaking out that Dan Markel was just shot and wondering, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? So then, as she recounts this, she feels some sense of conflict with the investigators. I'm sure she was terrified, thinking that they were coming to arrest her because of consciousness of guilt. Okay, innocent people don't immediately assume that they're going to be arrested of crimes that they did not commit. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Think of all the people that did not commit crimes that get wrongfully convicted because they go into the police station and they don't think that they did anything wrong, so they don't realize that they're in any kind of danger. And then they wind up saying something or doing something that the police completely interpret the wrong way and wind up getting themselves into big trouble. She wasn't involved in the crime. I mean, she was with her girlfriends at lunch. Like, guilty people don't go to lunch with their girlfriends. I must be innocent because, see, I was just out with my girlfriends. It's an alibi. Okay. So she wants us to know that she found out at lunch with her girlfriends, as per the usual, because the police came and got her, physically took her away by insisting that she come with them. Okay. And that sort of indicates what? What does insisting indicate? Well, it kind of indicates that she didn't really have a choice, is what that indicates. And I'm guessing that's not 100% true, but that's the way she wants us to. That's what she wants us to know. She wants us to believe that she felt like she didn't have a choice. She had to go with the police back to the station. And then notice that she doesn't say she was interviewed for 8 hours, but she says that she was interrogated. Okay. And then, so the police picked me up from where I was having lunch with my friends innocently. Then they, number two, insisted, you're coming with me. Okay. And then those bastards interrogated me for 8 hours straight because it must have been me, right? That's what she's telling us here. So she's throwing out sarcasm to try to, once again, this entire statement, you guys, is about how she's not guilty, but being made to feel like she did something wrong. That's what this whole thing is. This entire statement is her saying, look, guys, I'm innocent, but they made me feel like I did something wrong, even though I didn't. And the problem with that is that, notice, the focus in this story is not on the fact that her husband was murdered. And it's not on the fact that I am a widow or a woman with children who are now fatherless, who's now grieving the loss of him and having to move on with my life the way you might suspect an innocent person would be experiencing this, as grief, as loss. And, what are we doing? We have to move on with our lives. Instead, the entire focus of this first paragraph now is, I didn't do it. Someone shot my ex-husband. Someone, not me, shot my ex-husband in the head. So she throws that in there so that you'll be distracted and look right at that instead of the fact that someone, not her, right, shot her ex-husband while he was pulling into her house after having just dropped off her small children at school. And she throws that out there almost as a way to get more sympathy, right? Because somehow it's much worse that he was shot after dropping off the kids. Like that somehow means that they were more in danger. Maybe the kids would have been in danger if they'd been in the car. Now, we all know that actually the reason why he was shot when he was because the two bad guys in the story were not going to shoot the kids, right? So actually the kids have very little to do with the story at all. They're not even involved in the story. But in Wendy's mind, she wants us to know, Wendi Adelson wants us to know that, number one, Dan Markel was shot in the head as a way to, oh my God, shot in the head, right? Distract us from her involvement. And then another tactic to do that is to tell us how close her children were to this crime, even though they weren't really close at all, right? Then she says, I only learned of this when I was having an innocent lunch date with my friends, my two girlfriends. Note she makes a point to tell you they were girlfriends, my two girlfriends, not my friends, but my two girlfriends. Now, why would that be important? Because what's the difference between having lunch with friends and having lunch with two girlfriends? Well, the difference is when you think about a woman having lunch with her two girlfriends, it has a very different feeling of innocence, like it's cutesy and fun. You get this image of like a bunch of girls like out in a cafe sipping on a glass of white wine, instead of just like friends at lunch, which could be like at the pizza shop, right? So she's trying to paint a very specific portrait of what was going on. Here I am. I have an alibi. Here I am with my innocent me, with my two innocent girly friends having a glass of wine at lunch when we are interrupted by the big bad police who then take me away and interrogate me for the next 8 hours straight. So this is all very victim oriented also. Like, see, I'm the victim. I'm the victim. So then she says, I'm not really okay. And remember, the prompt was, how are you really? But the way that this is written, she's answering the question, how are you really? So she's answering the question, how are you really? By first explaining what's been going on, right? That this all happens. And then she says, I am not really okay, which insinuates she's not really okay because of this sequence of events. So it's very intentionally, this very first paragraph is intentionally designed to get us to believe that Wendi is not okay because she just went through this experience. And that's what she wants you to believe. Okay. Then she says, I list the things that are going well when people ask this question. So when people ask, how are you? She then is telling us, I list the things that are going well when people ask this question. I just tell people with emotional distance. In other words, I just make a list, like almost the way you would read a to-do list about what's going on in my life when people ask me how I'm doing. Right? So there's a lot of distance, and she wants you to feel that. It's very intentional. Like, oh, things are great. This is what's going on with me. Check, 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 check. It's very distant, right? Using the word things about what's going on in her life implies space between what's really going on and what she's listing. Okay. My children are thriving and happy. Now, this is interesting, right? So she wants us to know, she wants the world to know, because remember, this is Wendi's way of narrating Wendi getting her side of the story out. That's what this is all about, right? So what does she want us to know? Well, she wants us to know that her children, okay, my children, her children, not Dan's children, not our children, not, the children we had together, but my kids are thriving and happy. She really wants us to know that. Which really does tell you everything you need to know about Wendi Adelson, even when she's trying to get you to feel bad about the death of Dan Markel. She can't make him important in the children's lives. She also wants you to know, well, they don't really care that their father is dead. Thank God for that. We, her and her kids, live with my parents. And this is a huge tell, because with is an indication of conflict. So while she's trying to get us to see this as closeness, we are living with my parents, and we are so lucky to be living with them because they care so much about us. She's actually telling us that there's conflict there. Who are incredibly, notice, underline, incredibly devoted to our well-being. So she is underlining here the term incredibly as it relates to the word devoted. Now, what is the difference between a devoted grandparent, for example, and an incredibly devoted? this. Think about your life. Think about someone or something, whether it's now or in the past, that you felt was devoted to you, devoted to your well-being, or think about somebody that you felt devoted to. What's the difference between being devoted to something and then incredibly devoted? Because devoted already implies, that term already implies deep, deep-seated, right? Devotion is like as much allegiance and alignment as you can get with a full heart behind something. A devotion is a total surrender to something, right? But she's adding on to that, incredibly devoted to our well-being. Our includes her and her 2 kids. So I ask you, geez, what could that be a reference to? Because what she's trying to do here, she's trying to get her mom and her family off the hook. She's trying to say, my wonderful family who could do no wrong, who would never hurt my ex-husband.
I made my brother, the one, his name is Charlie, the one I'm really close to, he makes a lot of jokes in bad taste, and it was a joke he made. He bought the TV for me this morning that got broken, and I was talking to him about whether it made sense to pay to fix it or whether I should get a new one, and it was always his joke that, like, he knew Danny treated me badly, and it was always his joke. He said, I looked into hiring a hitman, and it was cheaper to get you this TV, so instead I got you this TV. I mean, he would never. He's my big brother, and he's been taking care of me since I was little, but he would never. And I told that to the repair guy this morning.
Right. That's okay.
I said, he asked me how much it cost, and I said I didn't know because it was a gift, because my brother said it was cheaper than a hitman. It was my divorce present.
Okay.
Such a horrible thing to say. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
But even my family, who felt like I had been mistreated, would never do something like this. Never.
Are so devoted to our well-being. We are so lucky to be with them. But what she's actually doing is pointing directly at them for the murder of Dan Markell by saying they are so devoted to their well-being. They're incredibly devoted to the point where they would go above and beyond devotion to hire a hitman to then kill the person who her family felt was a direct threat to her and her kids' well-being. Okay, so this is almost a full admission in some way. So then she says, I started my own immigration practice. Okay, so now she's going on to list the things that are going well, as she just told us she would. I started my own immigration practice. So once again, it's my own. So what she's telling you here is, I actually left some other immigration practice and went out on my own. And on top of that, she signed up to do a 1-year clerkship with the Federal 11th Circuit in September. And once again, we see that with in there, which makes you wonder, was there some conflict about doing this clerkship? My guess is yes. And my guess is that she did it simply for the prestige, simply to put it on the resume, for people to see her in a very specific way. I'm assuming to connect her with justice in some way. So this is indicating that she is right back in business when it comes to her work and her career and her law career, her career as a lawyer. And this is interesting, and I really want to underline this next sentence, which means, so now she's telling us why, which means why she told us these first 2 things. Well, that means I can get off Obamacare and have 1 year guaranteed of a steady income. So, why would she tell us this? Why would she add this last line, which means I can get off Obamacare and have 1 year guaranteed of steady income? Why do we need to know that? I mean, this part is not about her accomplishments because the whole prompt is, how are you really? Right? Well, I'm doing pretty good. I started my own company, right? Which is what she just told us. And I signed up to do a fancy courtship. But now she's bringing in Obamacare for a number of important reasons. Number one, that tells us right off the bat that she doesn't have any money and that she did not benefit financially from the death of Dan Markel. And that's what she wants us to know. She wants us to know, see, look, there was no financial benefit from his death. See, guys, I didn't get any money from the death of Dan Markel, so you can't put this on me. Because, see, there wasn't a financial motive. I'm not collecting on the life insurance. I'm still on Obamacare. And now I'm really excited because I'm going to have 1 year of steady income, meaning up until now, I didn't have 1 year of guaranteed steady income, which certainly isn't true. She could have stayed in Tallahassee and she had a job, right? And I think she even kept that job for at least 6 months working from home after Dan Markel's death. So it's a little misleading the way she's stating this. The way it's stated here, you would think that she hadn't had a job in a decade and now she's finally going back to work a little bit, but that's not true at all, right? She's basically been employed throughout this entire time. So the reason why she's bringing up Obamacare and how great it is that she's going to have, 1 year of guaranteed income is because she wants us to know she did not financially profit from Dan Markel's death. So then she says, but the truth is, now, anytime you see this, anytime you see anyone emphasizing what they're about to say is true, you want to take a closer look at it because anything that I say, the assumption is that the words coming out of my mouth are true. Otherwise, why would I be saying them? So when somebody makes it a point to tell you that what they're doing is telling you the truth, it is very often not true. And it's the guilt that they are feeling as they are about to say what they're about to say that in part is prompting the need to stress how true what they're about to say is. And from a person who's carrying consciousness of guilt's perspective, it seems like this is something that an honest person would say. But again, an honest person doesn't stress that they're about to tell you the truth because they're always telling you the truth and they assume you know that. Now, even those among us who have the most trivial amount of knowledge about the Adelsons must already know that this statement, I miss my life, in reference to Tallahassee, is absolutely ridiculous. Right? Is not true in any way, shape, or form. Wendi Adelson could have stayed in Tallahassee for the rest of her life if she wanted to, but she had absolutely no desire to stay there. And from what everybody is telling us, everybody that knew her at the time at all, stressed that she hated Tallahassee, that she was not in love with her job, even despite the fact that she was successful there. Right? So now she's trying to convince us how much she missed her life. And of course, why would she tell us this? Why would she be writing this to us now in this course? Well, because she wants you to believe that she would never have hurt Dan Markel to leave Tallahassee because she really loved her life there.
Wendy was an alcoholic while I was with her. She drank her dinner most nights. Extremely fragile, extremely depressed. Many, many nights sitting, hated Tallahassee so much that thought we're a bunch of country bumpkins, so we liked Tallahassee because she's from Miami. Didn't hide that fact. Thought it was bizarre that I moved here from Phoenix. And the two conversations that we had every single day for 9 months were, Danny is an evil monster. Tallahassee is the worst place in the world to live, and I can't believe I got stuck here because of Danny Markel. She was obsessed with those two concepts. So I got really tired of hearing that, but I heard that every day for 9 months.
Okay. So we all know that this is bullshit. So now she goes on to tell us about how wonderful her life was with Dan Markel. I was a professor at Florida State University College of Law. Okay. I was so proud. And this is interesting because it's written in the past tense. So I was so proud to be a public interest attorney and a mentor to my students. So I was so proud. Past tense. Okay. I was so proud to be a public interest attorney and a mentor to my students. Okay. Then she goes on to tell us the novel I wrote about my clients' stories had just been chosen as the common read for all first-year students at FSU. In August, I was supposed to be the commencement speaker. So you'll see how whether things are going great in Tallahassee, the way she's painting this picture here, or whether things are going great in Miami, the way she had painted the picture in the paragraph before this one, either way, she's just not happy. Okay. So the truth is that either way, if you read underneath the kind of context clues, if you read the subtext, what she's saying is, I wasn't happy then, even though she wants us to believe she was, and I'm not happy now. So once again, she's reading off a list of accomplishments, which for Wendi Adelson, there's no shortage of. And then she writes, and then I was supposed to take, okay, importantly, and then, meaning and after, so and after I was supposed to be the commencement speaker, I was supposed to take my brain cancer surviving, just turned 70-year-old father, on a trip to Machu Picchu. And then I was supposed to, I was planning to take my brain cancer surviving, just turned 70 father on a trip to Machu Picchu. Now, let me ask you a question about this, okay? Why wouldn't Wendi have been able to do that given the circumstances? What would have stopped her based on everything we know? What does Dan Markel's death have to do with whether or not her father go on a trip to Machu Picchu? And I don't get to complain as though, and I don't get to complain, meaning, in the way this is written, that complaining is a luxury. And I don't even get to complain that I didn't do any of those things because I'm alive. So now she's saying, and on top of the fact that I didn't get to go on this trip with my brain cancer surviving dad who deserved for me to take him on a trip because of the killers, I also don't get to complain because I'm alive and Danny isn't. And now this is really interesting. You wonder, who is this written to, right? Now, I would make the argument that there's a lot going on here. There's the superficial level, which is Wendi Adelson wanting us to believe that her life has been disrupted by the fact that her ex was murdered, and she feels some kind of survivor's guilt that he's dead and she isn't. And that because this terrible thing happened, she has to just be happy with the fact that she wasn't murdered also. Like, she's not allowed to have feelings because she's still alive, and so she can't complain. But the problem with that is that this is also evidencing anger. Anger at Dan Markel. Anger over the fact that even in his death, now she has to act like he's a martyr. Now her life has to be continually negatively impacted by him. She can't do all the things that she wanted to do, essentially because it will look bad. And she's not allowed to have feelings because he's dead and she's alive. This is me interrupting your programming to remind you to like this video right now. And don't forget to subscribe. Like this video. She wants us to see all the things that she's had to give up because of Dan Markel's death. And if that doesn't have sort of like borderline-y narcissistic traits to it, I don't know what does, right? And it's interesting because she's sort of alluding to that, like, oh, does it make me a bad person that I'm complaining about not being able to go on this great vacation for my dad's 70th because I'm alive and Danny's dead? So she's complaining about the fact that she's not allowed to feel bad because she can't do all the things that she wants to do. And the reason she can't do all the things that she wants to do is because she doesn't want people to think she's cold-hearted. She doesn't want people to look at her and say, your ex-husband died. How could you go to Machu Picchu?
I'm not really okay. I list the things that are going well when people ask this question. My children are thriving and happy. We live with my parents who are incredibly devoted to our well-being. I started my own immigration practice, and I just signed up to do a 1-year clerkship with the Federal 11th Circuit in September, which means I can get off Obamacare and have 1 year guaranteed of a steady income. But the truth is that I miss my life. I was a professor at Florida State University College of Law. I was so proud to be a public interest attorney and a mentor to my students. The novel I wrote about my clients' stories had just been chosen as the common read for all first-year students at FSU. In August, I was supposed to be the commencement speaker, and then I was supposed to take my brain cancer surviving just turned 70 father on a trip to Machu Picchu. And I don't get to complain that I didn't do any of those things because I am alive.
And you can see here that she wants us to feel bad for her. That's the goal, right? Like, she wants us to feel like she's been through this horrible trauma, this traumatic experience, but she's not allowed to complain. And she also sacrificed and she also suffered, but she's not complaining because, see, she's alive and her boys could have been injured and they weren't injured. And so she has to be grateful. And I think that's a lot of what this is about too. Remember, the goal for her is to get her side of the story out. But you always have to keep in mind that her side of the story is the contrived version that she wants us to stumble upon and interpret as the real way that she felt, right? So this has been thrown out there in such a way that it looks like it's not intentional, that it looks like it wasn't calculated for the media, or it's not her giving her lawyer a statement. It looks authentic, but you can see that it's written in the voice of an innocent woman who's being kind of mischaracterized broadly as probably guilty of murder. And remember, by the way, to this point, nobody has said that. To this point in the story, which was about a year after Dan Markel's murder, there was nobody explicitly saying, oh, Wendy's guilty. Nobody pointing at Donna and Charlie explicitly. Now, we know now the investigators were immediately on to Charlie, but a year later, it was too soon after the crime for Dateline in 2020 and, Nancy Grace and all of the true crime outfits to have their fingers pointed at Wendi Adelson. Okay, so now she's given feedback from the class, which is actually pretty interesting and funny, but I will let you take a look at that yourself, and does a little rewrite of what we just read. All right. So now we have a much better sense of the timeline. It wasn't even a year, it was 10 months ago. So she changes the date outright to 10 months ago. Someone killed the father of my children. Now, remember, she's trying with these edits to appease the people in the class, the folks in the feedback that she got in the workshop from the class. So she's giving us more detail about the murder. And it's interesting just to note what those changes are and how they change the narrative, right? So now, 10 months ago, someone killed the father of my children. So she's achieving the same objective as in the first draft. This was very recent. And this is what our relationship was like at the time of his death. And it wasn't me that did this. So recently, someone, not me, killed the father of my children. And you can see the way she says the second sentence, she's completely emotionally distanced from Dan Markel. First, we got divorced, and then he got murdered. And there is definitely sarcasm, almost like a subtle humor that she's sort of interjecting in these first few sentences that once again are designed to get our attention and almost immediately not only ask questions, but feel bad for her. In casual conversations, I don't know whether to call him my ex late spouse or my late ex spouse, except that late ex spouse sounds like latex spouse. I think this is probably the biggest window that we really get in this writing into Wendi Adelson. I don't think that she has any true emotion about the death of Dan Markel. And that's what's coming across here. Now, maybe for the sake of this writing exercise and in the larger context, this fits because she's trying to speak to how traumatizing this has been and is talking about how she doesn't know how to deal with this event in her life. I actually think she doesn't have any real emotion about it except for anger and frustration that she has to pretend to feel bad about this and deal with the consequences of his death. Wendi Adelson knows that she's supposed to be sad about these things. She knows that they are supposed to be traumatic events. She knows that There's supposed to be things that should and would affect you in a negative way, but the point of all of this is she does not have those emotions about it. And the anger that we're seeing from her here is over the fact that she feels like she's being incorrectly painted in this scenario, that it's everybody else's fault that she doesn't get to have feelings, not that she doesn't actually feel bad because she doesn't feel bad about him being dead. So she's trying to be the victim here. And actually, it's in the very last part of this writing exercise that we truly get a sense for how she feels about Dan Markel. Now, we're not going to get to that today because we've got 4 parts to this thing, but keep it in your mind for later. It's the last part that says everything we need to know about how she feels about Dan Markel. So then she goes on to tell us last July, it's interesting that she really wants us to know exactly when this happened. And by the sounds of it, she wants us to know that it was recent. Someone, and we still don't know who, which is exactly what someone implies, shot my ex-husband point blank in the back of the head as he pulled into our garage after driving our then 3- and 4-year-old sons to preschool. Once again, she is giving us kind of the shock value, right? Like he was shot at point blank in the back of the head. It was this very violent act, and she wants us to feel that it was this violent act that you're supposed to have a strong reaction to, though she does not have a strong emotional reaction to it. And again, she wants to increase how violent this was somehow by pointing out that her sons were close to this event, even though they really weren't, by framing it as though, geez, had he been shot 20 minutes earlier, the boys would have been in the car.
But the boys are going to stay with you, okay? And they'll be fine.
I don't know if I can take care of them like this.
All right. Where's your closest family at?
My family actually just talked to my brother this morning.
So one of the very first things she does when she gets into the police interview room is stress that she's not going to be able to take care of her children alone. And the way that she does it, she makes it seem like it's the investigator's idea that she should go leave Tallahassee and stay with her family in Miami. Like she has no other choice, and see, the investigator co-signed it right away.
My parents are in Coral Springs.
Okay.
And my brother, I have 2 brothers, but I'm very close to one of them who is in Fort Lauderdale.
And the reason why it's coming up here in this writing class is so that she can explain to us what her motives were in leaving Tallahassee.
And I have no idea who would do this, and I feel like they're out there. And if they're capable of this, like, what's to keep them from going after the kids? Like, if they hate Danny, then why wouldn't they hate his children?
Right, because she's very defended against people saying, but you left within days of Markel's murder. I mean, clearly you couldn't wait to get out of there. So I think this is in part to try to explain away why she needed to get away, because she was so afraid for the safety of her children. We married when I was in my mid-20s. Now that implies 2 things. So first, we married. So that's okay. So he and I got married, which oddly The way this is written, it does indicate that she still feels close to Dan Markel, which is odd, right? We married is a way to frame that implies that the two of them still have somewhat of a close relationship. And that probably tells us that he's on her mind a lot. She's thinking about him a lot. So he feels close to her in that moment. We married when I was in my mid-20s. Of course, that also indicates he was older, the way that's written. And I know he was, I don't remember how much older, but the way she said that, she didn't say when we were in our mid-20s. She said when I was in my mid-20s, which makes it very clear he was not, she was. So he was older. When I thought I could cheat the system and marry a man I lacked passionate love for because, hey, didn't that die anyway during marriage? Again, she loves these run-on sentences. So what she's insinuating is that she was young and stupid and therefore didn't think that she would pay the price for marrying someone that she didn't really want to be with. But I would also encourage you to consider it's another example of her making this admission without a lot of emotion behind it, with more sarcasm, but not any real connection to the words, right? And we even have her reading it, and we still don't get a whole lot of emotion. We get, if anything, distance. So then it says, I saw his intellect and his big heart and thought he would make a wonderful father for my children. And it's interesting the way that she's talking about Dan Markel throughout this. She's not crapping on him, right? I mean, she's not saying anything negative about him per se. If anything, she continues to try to paint a picture where they were still experiencing, or she was still experiencing, some closeness with him. So here it says, I saw his intellect and his big heart and thought he would make a wonderful father for my children. And you'll note that anytime Wendi talks about the children, they're always hers, right? They're always my children, which speaks again to how unnecessary she really saw Dan Markel to be. And then she says, our marriage dissolved after the children arrived, as the loneliness of being married to someone that didn't view me as an equal crept in. Again, with these very long sentences, it's very important for her to be descriptive in how she's painting a picture. So she's using these very long sentences to try to be clear with the image that she's painting. But it can get easy to lose the point when she's doing this. So we'll look at this again. Our marriage was once again our, so there's a closeness implied there, dissolved after the children arrived, as the loneliness of being married to someone that didn't view me as an equal crept in. So I've done some digging on this, and I even read Ruth Markel's book. And in it, she talks about how her son used to talk about Wendi, and even went back and found emails where he's exalting her and talking about her wins and talking about how successful she is and her many accomplishments. I wonder here if what was really going on in this marriage wasn't that Dan didn't see her as an equal, but that she didn't feel like she was an equal because of how successful he was in his own right, because that he graduated from Harvard. Ruth also talks about how at the wedding, Donna insisted that they not bring up any of his accomplishments, that they not bring up Harvard, because she was very concerned that he would outshadow her. It makes me think that Wendi is so deeply insecure, despite all her accomplishments, that she could not tolerate the idea that he could also be equally successful. And if anything, actually, his success could be a reflection on her in a positive way. She just couldn't get her mind around that, which speaks to her own very deep seated insecurity. Because remember, human beings project on everything, particularly narcissists. So, what narcissists do is they see in everybody else what's really going on inside of them. So, if she's pointing the finger and saying, oh, he didn't see me as an equal, my guess is she didn't feel like she was an equal. So now she's kind of recounting, as she tells us this, why they were divorced, right? So she's elaborating on the state of the marriage, before they were divorced. Now she goes on to say, it feels sacrilegious these days even to suggest something less than heroic about my latex husband because he was murdered. And this is so telling because she's trying to own here. She's trying to tell us that, she feels like she shouldn't say anything bad about him because he's dead. He has been shot. But she still does, right? She still takes a shot right at him. This also makes me wonder how much time Dan Markel continued to occupy in the mind of Wendi Adelson after he was gone. Because clearly she is hung up on number one, how everybody perceives her. I'm sure everywhere she goes, she wonders, do people recognize me? Do they think I'm a murderer? The name is tainted. And it just doesn't go away. It's a story that does not go away and hasn't really since the day he died. Maybe they had 2 years, arguably, before Katie McBanoa and Rivera and Garcia were all arrested. But this is exactly that time. And here we see where she's at. Even during the time when nobody's pointing the finger at her, at least not publicly, we get the sense that she feels like everybody's pointing the finger at her. And that was before all of this, before we knew the family was actually involved. So she says, right, it feels sacrilegious these days, even to suggest something less than heroic about my latex husband. Right. But of course, as she's saying that, she's making fun of him, calling him her latex husband because he was murdered. Now, why would that be? Ask yourself, right? What does his murder have to do? Why should Wendi feel guilty about describing the dissolution, the end, the dissolving of their marriage because he's dead? So this to me is also an admission of guilt because what she's telling us is that she feels guilty saying anything bad about him. She's saying it's because he's dead, but in actuality, it's because of how he died, not because he is dead, right? Because what does it matter if he's dead or alive, except if you were responsible for how he got there?
It is the defense counselor's duty to protect the rights of the individual, as it is the prosecution's duty to uphold and defend the laws of the state. Justice for all. Only we have a problem here.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out The ones who heard my cries and watched me weep. I love everything. Fire spreading all around my room. My world's so bright, it's hard to breathe, but that's alright.